Psychofitness with Juma here, and today in this episode I'd like us to look at the different stages of substance and drug and alcohol addiction. So basically we're just going to look at the stages that an individual goes through before they develop a full-blown substance use disorder, which is the final stage of the stages of addiction. So to start, probably we'll look at the meaning of the term addiction and what does this addiction mean? When you say I'm addicted to a particular substance, what does that mean to you, and how do you understand the word addiction per se? So basically defined, addiction, it's a neuropsychological disorder. It means it affects your nervous system as well as your psychological or mental system. So it's a neuropsychological disorder, which is basically characterized by intensive drug seeking and use despite negative consequences that this particular drug or alcohol might have on your life. So it could be you get to a point where your usage of a particular substance is affecting not only your health or your life, but also the life of people around you, like your family, your relatives, and whatnots. That is what we call addiction. When you cannot stop using on your own, despite the negative consequences that your drug taking or alcohol consumption is causing to the persons around you, and most importantly, to your own health. Now, drug addiction doesn't occur on an overnight or on a drinking spree. You don't wake up one morning, take a sip of alcohol. Supposing this was alcohol, clearly you can tell it's water though. You don't take a sip of that and become addicted to it. You start, there's a starting point for every addictive tendency. And in this video, I just want to focus on probably alcohol and other drugs. These stages occur in linear, call it motion or linear perspective. And the first stage of addiction, which we call initiation, which means the first instance when you taste a particular drug. So this first instance is called initiation stage, and people initiate substance use for various reasons. For teenagers, it's probably out of curiosity. They want to find out, how this drug will make them feel, or maybe they saw somebody who was on this drug and the way they were behaving and the way they were feeling and probably what they were saying, and they got curious, and so they want to experiment with that. And maybe due to availability of that substance, they might get access to it and use that particular substance. The very first instance that you use a substance, that's referred to as the initiation phase of substance addiction. And also, it is not only teenagers who experiment or who initiate substance use. Some people actually have their initiation phase in adulthood. It means somebody grew up, maybe got past teenage into young adult life before they never tested any drug. So the very first instance that they might indulge would be referred to as the initiation phase. And adults probably indulge because not much of curiosity, but maybe there's a life circumstance they want to deal with, or they want to deal with the work stress or all that. And probably somebody advised them that you need to unwind a little bit. You need to take this, it will calm you down. And so they find themselves doing probably a substance for the first time. Now, people don't necessarily have to move to the next stage of addiction once they initiate substance abuse. Somebody can initiate substance abuse and stop at that level, and they don't have to progress to the other stages of addiction as we are going to look at them. But if that curiosity was satisfied and this person finds this substance appealing, they move on to the next stage, which is experimenting. For teenagers, it's more of we are going for a party, and so I think we need to lighten up, and we're going to have some alcohol, we're going to have some marijuana, we're going to have some molly or ecstasy. We need to do some weed cookies and all that, just to lighten up the party, get into the party mode and all that. And this stage where substance use is associated with probably, a particular event or a particular instance is referred to as experimentation stage. So they experiment, and at experimentation stage, somebody might try different substances. So somebody might use not only alcohol, but also mix it with marijuana and also mix it with ecstasy, probably a little bit of methamphetamine. And these are drugs that are in our streets, the streets of Nairobi in Kenya. All these drugs are available. And so persons can always usually get them often. Also, there are also prescription pills that people tend to abuse more at this experimentation stage. And once somebody experiments with a drug, they identify. In terms of addiction, people tend to identify with their particular drug, what we call a drug of choice. So I've experimented with alcohol, marijuana. I've experimented with, ecstasy. I've experimented with methamphetamine. I've done, in Kenya, we have this substance called muguka or miraa, which people tend to also abuse. So individuals identify with a particular drug and they realize, I think I like the feeling of alcohol more than I do for marijuana, or I think I prefer taking muguka as opposed to cigarettes. And so an individual identifies with either one or two substances that they continue using, moving to probably now the next third stage of use, which is regular use. At regular use, you start experiencing negative consequences of your substance use because you're no longer, you are initiated, you have experimented with it, and you've identified with it. So you associate substance use with probably instances where you're bored, or when you're lonely, or when you have some sort of stress that is stressing you. There's a lot of pressure at school, and you want to cope with the situation around the pressure. There's pressure coming from work as an adult, and you want to cope with that situation at work. So you find yourself occasionally using this substance to cope with this situation. Or you also start having a pattern where it's a weekend. I think a weekend would be boring without substance in my system. I need to get the high feeling from this substance. So you start having a pattern, the regular pattern of substance abuse or substance use. So you can either do it at weekends. You cannot miss to use a substance at a party. You use it whenever you want to unwind, you feel tense and all that, and that is just referred to as regular use. You also, as I mentioned earlier, at regular use, there starts to be negative consequences. So you can wake up in the morning with a hangover from the previous night's drink, and that might make you probably report to work late occasionally, which is not something that is frequent, and so it's not as problematic as the next stage that we are looking at, which is called, the risky use. So from regular use at the third stage, we move to the fourth stage, which is the risky use. Because you have conditioned your brain or your system to usually, unwind in an uncomfortable life situation, circumstances with substances. So at risky use, the frequency of use increases. So probably you might start using drugs more often than usual. You might also now deal with every life challenge using drugs, that is risky use. You might find that you're starting to shift your finances from their original purpose to substance use. So you might allocate school fee money to maybe a bottle of whiskey or a bottle of vodka. You might shift maybe your transport to whatever, or fuel money to other substances. And you might start missing on important appointments. Or probably you have a pattern of reporting to work late. You have a pattern of reporting to work when you're intoxicated. You also develop a pattern for students. You start missing classes, you start missing important assignments, and maybe you don't submit them on time. For persons who drive, you might be arrested occasionally for driving under influence. So the negative impacts of a substance usage in your life is visible. It's not only overt but also covert. So somebody can actually tell that this guy, of late, he's been not himself, because even at this point, your peers or your social group starts changing. If you are this guy who usually left work and maybe could drive home straight from work, or could hang out with your friends a little bit for some, a chat or something, you find that you start neglecting your friends who are not using these substances, and you start associating more with persons who abuse. So there comes a shift in your social life circle and your social patterns. And risky use, also your system or your body has started adopting to this substance. It started recording a pattern where whenever I'm stressed, this guy needs to intoxicate this system for me to stop feeling stressed. But we always say this intoxication or this absence of the stress when somebody is intoxicated is only but temporary. So once people get from risky use, they get to the fifth stage of addiction, which is dependence. And dependence is not only now a behavioral concept as much as it is mental and also psychological per se, to say. At dependence stage, when you don't use the drug, you elicit a withdrawal symptom. It means when you don't drink, probably in the morning or probably before you go to bed. Let's say, look at, for instance, if you don't drink before you go to bed, you might not get enough sleep, or you might not be able to fall asleep, to put it clearly. If you don't drink in the morning, you might find it a little bit hard to start off your day because you'll be experiencing probably some shivers, you might be experiencing cold, you might be feeling some stomach upsets, and these are just but a few, examples of withdrawal response that is elicited by the absence of this substance in your system. And I also have to mention that at dependence stage, as an individual's priorities have shifted completely. So people, you might start getting warnings at work, or probably you've received them from the risky use stage, because at risky use, it's very visible that your using is already affecting your work. So at dependence, it is clear that you're going to have problems at work. Maybe there's been warnings and not one or twice of them. And at school, probably a student might completely miss on attending classes, or you might start getting, I think they're called supplementary in Kenya, whatever, where you miss an exam because you are too intoxicated to attend it, or probably you just didn't read throughout your semester, that you have no content in your head to go and put on paper. So you might start missing important things as exams. You might start, in the house, you start neglecting your responsibilities. You're no longer providing to the family as you used to provide. You're no longer, responsible enough. Your sexual life has been tampered with. So your relationship with your spouse is probably also dwindling. You don't have enough time for your children and your family. You start isolating. So you're no longer spending time with family as you used to, whether you're an adult or you're married or you're not married. So you start locking, for teenagers, they start locking themselves in their rooms. They just don't want to socialize with people at that level. And also the decisions you start making in life are a little bit off the grid, because now there's a total all-round shift in behavior patterns. And with all this dependence, people move to the final stage of addiction, which is the addiction itself, or what we call the substance use disorder. And the substance use disorder stage, which there are various ways to tell that somebody is already at this stage, the substance use disorder. And one, their mental processes or their psychological processes are being interfered with. So depending on a substance that somebody is using, this manifestation of the symptoms of substance use disorder usually manifests differently. So for persons, probably for alcoholics, they may, when an alcoholic with a substance use disorder, or what we call the alcohol use disorder, which we will look at as a whole topic on its own on a different video, people with substance use disorder have no rational decision making. They don't make decisions rationally. They don't think like persons without this disorder, because there's a damage that has been done to their brain system that interferes with the decision making. So as much as somebody at dependence and risk use might notice that their drinking is interfering with their functioning, and they're able to tell, persons with substance use disorder just don't care. They don't care whether they will steal your money to go and drink. They don't care whether they'll sell their most valuable assets so that they can get the drinking money. They don't care that their children haven't gone to school. They don't care that some people haven't been fed at home. And even themselves, they don't care that they haven't taken food. And sometimes people think that this is a choice or is a behavioral thing. But when you study deeply and look into the ramifications brought about on the brains of persons with substance use disorder, you realize that this is a brain damage thing. The prefrontal cortex that is responsible for decision making and all that has been completely damaged or somehow partially damaged. So these persons might not make these rational decisions based on the behavioral aspects, but based on the damage that has been done to their brain system. And this more or less cuts across majority of drugs, because every drug that we consume is psychoactive. And by psychoactive, it means it has it activates some aspects of your mental processes and parts of your brain that either interferes with or elevates the functioning of these various parts of the brain. There's a video that we will also do that will focus on the damages that substance abuse does to various parts of the brain, including the prefrontal cortex. Drug use at the substance use disorder stage is not a conscious choice. It's not something you decide to do, but rather something you do for you to feel normal. So persons with substance use disorder use the substance to treat the condition, because that is how best they see that they can quickly, treat the situation that they're in. So these people feel sick. The withdrawal symptoms are now more loud and chronic as opposed to the previous stages that we discussed. And so if it is, if I don't use this substance, I'm gonna feel actually very ill, very sick, because of the withdrawal symptoms that I'm gonna experience. I'm gonna have some very severe headaches. I'm gonna have some severe stomachache and even stomach upset that I may diarrhea. I'm gonna shiver and I'm gonna feel very cold. I'm gonna feel like I'm losing it because I am not okay. And this cuts across all substances, be it alcohol. Well, for substances like marijuana, the withdrawal symptoms manifest in other ways, which we will look at. So just keep watching these videos and you will learn more about these substances and how they affect an individual. So point is, when somebody has gotten to the stage of substance use disorder, the best thing to do, because if you mention it to them, they tend to really get agitated about it. They also have this, an aversive reaction to any comment about their use or something that is related to that per se. They no longer hide it, but they will not accept that they need help. And one of the reasons as to why this happens is, one, we mentioned something about the damage to the decision-making parts of the brain. And so they cannot decide for themselves because that decision, the decision to decide has been already interfered with. Let me put it that way. The other thing is because of the fear of the sickness that this person is going to experience by the thought of, I'm not going to be able to sustain myself tomorrow because I'll be dumped somewhere in treatment where I cannot access, my substance of choice which I can use to calm down my system. And so the thought of, I'm going to experience these withdrawal symptoms, makes these persons unable to seek help. And the best thing to do is probably find somebody who understands the concept of addiction treatment, who can talk to these people, who can explain to them the importance of quitting at that particular time, or the importance of probably seeking treatment, because the last stage of addiction is crisis or treatment. So it's either something fatal happens to this individual, or they seek treatment and put a stop to all this that has been happening. Now, treatment, on the other hand, is a lifelong process for somebody with substance use disorder. And there are various treatment options that are available. You can, if you want to get help with you are struggling with a substance or alcohol, you can call the line below. You can also email us. Our email is down below, and we can help you assist yourself or a family member who's been struggling with this substance abuse or substance use disorder. And I also have to say that the progression of each and every stage of substance use disorder depends and varies from individual to individual. It doesn't mean if I start using today, I'm going to get to the substance use disorder phase tomorrow or next year, and so will my brother or my friend. We all have different physiological setup and makeup, and this, as much as also the amount consumed and the frequency and all that, and also the genetics involved. There's a previous video where we talked about genetics being involved in matters, mental health and all that, determines whether an individual and at what speed an individual progresses from one stage to the other until they get to the substance use disorder. It is different for every individual, and so we are not supposed to judge people when they get to this stage earlier, probably more than others. With all this, I will conclude this video on addiction stages, and say that it's been wonderful making and preparing for this session, for this video today. And I hope you've learned something about this addiction as a concept and as a stage of it. So I guess you'll see me in the next video. And with that, hit the subscribe button for this channel. You can also click on the notification bell to get any update of any upload that we are going to be uploading on this channel. Thank you. See you on the next video.